All right, so I already know we're live here, so let's go ahead and get rolling. Welcome back to Accountability Immersion Training. This is our week 7 live stream. 1 week to go. 1 week to go until we are complete with this training. And if you're joining me from the rest of the world, welcome, of course, as well. We're going to cover how to start accountability coaching. Paint by numbers. Paint by numbers. I love that. So as we have been doing in these live streams, we're going to cover some distinctions, some finer points, some stories, some explanations, just whatever I've seen that might be some little missing pieces around what we already cover in accountability immersion training. So today, one of the things that you get in accountability immersion training is you get a lot of kind of technical explanation. You get these great flow charts that are pretty paint by numbers. And so we were talking last week about this in the training session. And I said, every step in this 3-step process for accountability, after step 1, at least, so I guess it's the last 2 steps, each of those steps have a certain thread that they follow from step 1. So step 1, like everything that you do in step 2 and step 3 are they're premised on step 1. Like once you uncover what's really going on, what's stopping your client, then based on that, you will actually alter how you might approach the impact step, how you might approach the commitment step as well. And so I said, all this is covered in these flowcharts, in these flowchart videos, in the trainings that cover, like, hey, if it's this particular cause, you got to say this, or these are some different dialogues and distinctions that you can cover. And I thought, great, but we should put this together in like a spreadsheet so that every time you find a cause, like exactly what kind of conversations would be the most opportune, the most valuable, the most helpful to your clients. And so rather than just having a live stream talking about it or talking about something else, getting in deeper into the dialogues as we definitely can, and it's always helpful to do. I think we kind of did that in this last couple training sessions. Anyway, I said, why don't I just do it? Why don't I just put this spreadsheet together and give it to you? And I'm going to do that tonight. But scratch that. I've begun the spreadsheet. I have a quick and dirty version. I'm going to show you that. I also have a really cleaned up version that is not quite finished, but I wanted to start it tonight and show you what it's going to look like so you can just use this tool as like your final paint by numbers tool. Once you really know how to get through the flow charts and actually produce a phenomenal step 1, the rest of it kind of runs itself. And that's what we're going to cover today. However, before we get to that, I do want to explain why I really came up with this kind of paint by numbers approach. And there's 2 different ways I can explain this. The first one is that, I want to just share with you a little bit of a story. Before I was ever a coach, I was a musician and I studied music for over 5 years in college. And I started out at a local music school, and we had some really great teachers there. And eventually I moved up to New York City and played professionally in New York City and finished my studies at Manhattan School of Music, which is one of those things behind me, I'm sure probably says something about my Bachelor of Music degree, right? I don't know how valuable it's been, but there's one way it was valuable. And that's actually one of the impetus, or one of the kind of things that predicated what we do in accountability immersion training, what we do at Master Coach University in the Learn by Doing approach. When I first went to local music school, I had this amazing teacher. His name was Bunky, kind of a funny name, but he was well known as one of the top jazz improvisers alive, right? I mean, this guy used to eat breakfast with John Coltrane and Sonny Rollins, and he could play everything Bird ever played. It's just like one of the epically amazing musicians of the century, if you will, and great educator in the world. And he was my private tutor for several years. And he published this book. You can still find it, probably published somewhere. And can't remember the name of the book, but when I first read this book, it said, The way that I suggest that my students learn jazz improvisation, which is one of these amazing skills that it's like classical musicians that can play all this perfect virtuosic music, but a lot of them just like when they're given a blank page or just chord progressions, they don't have anything to do. Like they need to be kind of told what to do, right? Just kind of like little soldiers, right? They can't just be free. And many improvisers, especially jazz improvisers, learn that they need to not only learn a certain language, but they need to be able to be free with it so that just things can come through them in the moment and people can enjoy them, like in a way, composing momentarily, like not composing over a period of weeks and months, but composing like right now and surprising people with what comes through them, even surprising themselves as well. And so so Bunky's writing in this book, and this is before I even took lessons from him when I was going to the school, but I wasn't advanced enough to learn from the guy. And I read this first paragraph of his book, and he says, I teach jazz improvisation by a learn by doing approach. I was like, wow, that's interesting. So he just wants people to really do it, not just like study it and read all these books. Of course, he wrote a book, but the book was mostly things to do, things to practice. And so he gave all these different like techniques, patterns in all these different keys. Like here's some arpeggios, here's some, different little licks that you could play, like little like 2-bar things like that you could just kind of sing and learn and then play on your instrumentation. And that if you put it over the right chords and the right, notes, it would sound good. It would sound okay. And then you could connect that up with other things, kind of connect it up with other little languaging that you would play once it's all been memorized and everything. And then just get kind of good at just flowing these different arpeggios and lines and ideas and motifs. And then ultimately make musicality out of it with your volume and intonation and enunciation and just all this stuff you would learn as a musician, right? But being able to do it in real time. And I thought, wow, that's really, really cool. And so I started learning all this languaging, right? I learned all the techniques, all the tech, all the language, and I memorized all this stuff in like 12 different keys, all the 12 keys, of course. And after I could play all this stuff, like I would go into go to a bar and start playing, or I'd go play with a band, or I'd go play with one of the school bands, and I'd get a solo, and it's like, okay, now I get to play, and I'd play these little licks, right? But I couldn't connect them together. Like I'd play this one thing, and then I wouldn't know what to play, and I just get kind of stuck, and I play like a wrong note, and I'd be like, oh no, right? And I'd be like, oh no, this is not good. And after a while, some of the teachers started to explain, you need to be able to connect these things together and kind of practice how, like, kind of compose these things and put these things in different modes and different, over different chords, be able to kind of move these ideas up and down your horn, right? So I'd start doing these different things. It's really hard, because even though I could play these things, it's like you have to jump from one idea to another or one key to another. And it was kind of left-handed. It was kind of bumpy. It was like you would play this thing low, and then all of a sudden you had to move it up a fifth, and it didn't really connect with the other one, even though it was exact same idea. And so I just started playing these ideas in the same idea over and over and over again, different keys, right? And so I'm practicing this stuff, and I learned like 3 different ideas, right? And then I had this solo I had to play. I think it was like, I remember April or something like that, some tune. And we were going to perform at the Jacksonville Landing, which was like this like big mall at the time. I think they're knocking it down now 20 years later. But I was like, I'm going to play a solo in public, right? And so I'm practicing day after day after day, and I'm taking just 3 different ideas and I'm putting them in over these different chords and moving them up and down. After a while, I got pretty good at this. Like, it wasn't really even like improvisation after a while. It was just, okay, I'm just going to play these different things at several different levels, and I'm just kind of over preparing it. It's kind of like learning a speech. Like you're kind of learning everything you want to say ahead of time, and it's supposed to sound natural, but it's kind of pre-prepared, right? It's kind of scripted. And so, finally it's the day to play it, and I'm getting ready, and it's time for my solo all of a sudden. And I stand up, and they put the mic in the bell of your saxophone, right? And I started playing, and I could hear myself play like all throughout this big outdoor mall, and this crowds are listening and everything. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's me, right? And so I start playing exactly what I had learned to do. Started playing this one, I started moving them up and down. And so anyway, I get to the end of this solo, and I think I had a couple solos that day, and some of the faculty was in the crowd, and we went and commiserate with these guys and everything. And this guy who was like a doctor of music, I remember his name was Dr. Prince. Dr. Prince came up to me after the concert, and he shook my hand. He said, "Those were great solos." And I was like, wow, I actually did something right for a change, right? And here I am, this kid in I think it was like the first or second year of school. And I was wondering if I could even do this. Like, can I even play music for a living? Can I improvise with any ability? Can I play a solo that people would actually enjoy, that had an impact? And so suddenly I realized, wow, if I really work hard on this, I learn all these techniques and I play for hours and hours, and then I attach these things in the right order. And I kind of force myself to do certain things preemptively, in a overly prepared fashion. I might actually sound okay. It wasn't total freedom. It wasn't totally improvising, but I kind of got somebody who's really a good musician to look at me like I actually had done something good, so I was blown away. I was like, wow, I redoubled my efforts. I was getting super motivated. I need to work even harder because hey, something's working actually now. So finally, after years and years and years of this, I moved to New York City, and I'm learning all this different languaging, and now it's not just licks over different keys, it's different tunes, it's putting all these tunes in different keys, learning all these solos from other really great musicians and how I might integrate them into, different frameworks, different musical frameworks. And then I'm really composing for jazz orchestra and orchestrating for them and doing all this other fancy stuff, hours and hours and hours more of work, right? But after a while, it got to the point where I could start anywhere, on any note, on any phrase, on any idea that I just felt like playing, because I had, hundreds, if not thousands, in my head, in all keys, all over this horn, that suddenly I started to realize I'd forced myself to fit this stuff together for so many years that I could almost do it automatically. And I had all this kind of connective tissue plus all this languaging memorized, not just memorized in my head, hearing it, but memorized in my muscles. So I could literally just play anything, anytime, anywhere, move myself around in a way that was compelling, and something great would come out because I'd hear what fit and what didn't fit. I was connecting all the dots, the language that I had memorized, the way I could connect those patterns together. And then finally realizing the impact it was having on me, on the audience, on the chords, on the music that we wanted to play. And suddenly I was doing what Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Miles Davis was doing, which was just feeling the moment, expressing something to people, communicating with the rest of the band, and having this kind of democratic process of sharing what energy we're recreating together and actually making it sound good, even in the moment, coming up with new stuff all the time. And some of it was still kind of language, but it wasn't like I had to over prepare for something. I just work on a tune for a while, and then I could do anything over that tune. And it was really a beautiful, it's that experience was insanely pleasurable, to feel like I could just share things in this beautiful language that was aesthetically pleasing, but also conveyed emotion and a message in a way that words can never convey, you can imagine, and then do that with other people in combination in real time and have people enjoy it. I was like, okay, that's 5 years of my life, but still, wow, that was worth it. this just felt really, really amazing. And I felt like I'd accomplished something. Like, wow, I'm doing things that most people never be able to do, right? At a very high level too. So I stopped then. Then I quit. And I went to work for Tony Robbins. I started coaching. And at the time, I was like really a half-assed coach. I was not very good at what I did. Yet I had the same desire. I had the same interest to become really good. I was like, hey, not only is this something I love to do, but I could actually make money doing this, as opposed to like music where it's like two guys are making money and everybody else is starving. So I thought, how am I going to do this? How am I going to become really good as a coach? And I went through the training, and they teach you all this information, and like nobody was really learning how to coach though. They were just learning a bunch of language, a bunch of techniques, a bunch of processes, like trainer stuff. We were just like a bunch of animals that were like jumping through these hoops. But at the same time, I thought, wait a second, isn't this what I've been doing as a musician for years? Isn't what we are doing learning the techniques, committing them to memory, so we can actually do something as coaches? And I realized this is kind of the same thing. And so I had all these books and all this information. And I remember still distinctly to this day, friends of mine that I would like hypnotize and I would coach and I would work with. And how I did it originally was I learned the script, I learned the dialogues, I learned the information, and I thought about them and what they needed. And then so I'd change the order. I'd creatively add my own I'd like compose a session for them way before the session, right? Like days before the session, I'm thinking about what am I going to do to help this individual get over stage fright, or, handle a certain relaxation technique, or approach relationships differently, or whatever. And so I was starting to kind of not improvise, but plan out how I might work with somebody differently than somebody else, with the techniques that I was already learning and memorizing, the language, the already existing kind of robotic stuff. And so by the time I went through training with Tony, this was all before training because I was learning coaching before that. It was an avocation of mine. I saw what everybody else was learning, and I was still learning that stuff myself, but I was already kind of ahead in that I had already not improvised, but I already planned out different ways to kind of fashion the Lego pieces on top of each other, to rearrange the same language, the same information, the same pieces in different orders, in different ways, different pieces, and connect the technology, connect the dialogues, connect the scripted stuff in a way that was new, because I took, like, it's kind of like a painter takes different colors and combines them into a new color or a new texture or something. I was creating new colors and textures by combining things differently. Well, still kind of using the tools that I've been given, but it looked different. I mean, for instance, like this design right here, you can see there, I mean, there's a certain, this is like a font, right? And then we've got, you can't even see the logo, but there's our logo down there that somebody created. And then there's this little paint by numbers kind of image. And then there's a background. Now, the background has different colors. Obviously, I'm using, other colors in the foreground, etc. But I didn't make any of this. Like, I came up with a language and that's it. Like, I didn't create the logo. I didn't create the art. I didn't create the back. I didn't take this picture. I didn't do any of this. But I've assembled it in such a way that it creates an experience for people. And if I hadn't combined it in this way, or I'd used different building blocks, it would be a different experience. It would look so cool. Hopefully it looks cool. Anyway, I was doing that with coaching. I was designing something ahead of time and then creating it, but I couldn't yet do it in real time. So finally, I went to work for Tony. I still had all my scripts and all my information in front of me. But then I all of a sudden had 60, 70, 80 clients I was working with. And after a few months of doing coaching that often, 4 or 5 days a week, 6 to 10 hours a day, all of a sudden, all that stuff that was like things I would copy and paste and like script out, I didn't need the script anymore. I had it fully memorized. And then, even though there were some challenging clients, people that I didn't really know what to do with, I would think about them throughout the day. Like, what should I say? What kind of technique might work? What questions should I be asking them? What do I not know? What do I know? How do I alter how I work with this individual to really reach them? And I would come up with things for them in between sessions and then kind of improvise through it in the next session. But after a while, I didn't even need to do that. It just started coming through me automatically because I'd seen enough patterns. I'd worked with hundreds, if not thousands of people by that time, thousands of sessions at least. And it started to just become automatic for me, but not automatic like I always do the same thing every time. Automatic like I could improvise something based upon what was happening in the moment in a dance with my client. I was still using great techniques. I still understood what I was saying, and it was coming through in a fashion that worked because I knew there's things I had said before, right? But they were reassembled in different ways, and they came through me in different ways because of the moment, because of the dance I was having with my client. And all of a sudden, really wasn't all of a sudden, but it was like after a while, I guess suddenly I realized, oh my gosh, this is what I learned to do as a musician. This is what improvisatory virtuoso does in music, and now I'm doing it as a coach. That's what's powerful about the coaching I'm offering. And it evolved over the years, no doubt, after I left Tony. More information, more knowledge, more technique. But, you know, I never forgot that you're going to learn techniques are a dime a dozen, scripts are a dime a dozen. Memorization, that's important, no doubt, especially when you're getting started and you don't know anything to say or anything to ask. You need to have that kind of palette available to you like the artist has. But once you've got that and you fit it together in a million different ways, you know how to juxtapose things and aggregate them into a session, the themes, if you will. It's all memorized and then it comes through you naturally. Wow. I don't really have to worry about that stuff anymore. I've got what it takes. And it never leaves you after you've got that. And so this is what I would suggest that you do in accountability immersion training or in any coach training you're going through is, you know, to do exactly what I've done over the course of my career. And what I've prepared for you in accountability immersion training, as you probably know by now, because you should be watching these trainings, is we've got these here. I can even share it on my screen probably. We've got these, can I do this? Oh, you know what? Do I have to drag it? Okay, sorry guys, I thought I could share. Oh, here it is. I have to hit the share screen button. Screen one, here we go. Now we're gonna have a giant mirror for a second here, I'm sure. Can we do that? No, that's big. Let's try that. Okay, it's even better. Whoa, weird. Okay, so let me see. So let's take a look at this. Here we go. So what these dialogues give you, what these flowcharts give you, is they give you paint by numbers, places to start, decision points that you can make, and then you'll know what to do next and where you're done as well. Now, on top of that, each step you kind of know, well, hey, this step I've got to do certain things. And then each of these, as you know, if you've gone through the trainings, like eliciting the cause or eliciting the cover-up, you know the questions asked, you know the scripting, you know the languaging. You should know that stuff by now if you've gone through those particular training modules, right? And so bottom line is this material, let me go back to full screen here. These flowcharts give you the paint by numbers. They give you when the Legos fit what particular technique and approach. And what I give you in those video trainings is, okay, during this node, you're going to ask these questions, you're going to say these things, these are the dialogues that are important. And this is the measuring point as to whether or not you're done with that decision or you're done with that particular node, so you can move to the next step, the next node or the next decision in the flow chart as well. So it really gives you everything in terms of here's what I'm supposed to be saying, what you need to memorize, what you need to learn, and then here's when I say it in an order that we know works. The only variable is the client and what's going on with the client. So great. But here was what was left. What we found, or what I just found, last couple of weeks, is that each one of these flowcharts, each one of these steps, in these 3 steps of the accountability coaching process, they follow the first step. If you succeed with the first step of discovering what's really stopping your client, then during the impact step, getting into the impact of that, and then during the commitment step, getting into the committing to transform what's stopping you, there's a lineage, if you will. There's a thread that really begins in step 1 of uncovering what that is. And it kind of not dictates, but it suggests that based upon this initial puzzle piece, you need to add other puzzle pieces in order to support that particular client with that particular set of fundamental stopping points, things that they have not yet broken through for themselves. And so what I told you guys in that training session was, what we need is we need a kind of a spreadsheet that says, okay, if this is the issue, if this is the conversation that's stopping them or the issue that's stopping them, then they need to break through. Here's what you're going to say in step 2. Here's what you're going to say in step 3. So that even though you're not going to just say those things, you're going to do more than that. The flowcharts will dictate that. You have go-to scripting, like, okay, I start here, I go here, I go here. And you can just follow that. That plus the freedom that these flowcharts give you because you make these decisions through different nodes, even just following this stuff, you can get through a phenomenal coaching session with somebody. Now, is it going to be a little herky-jerky like that first solo that I played, where that doctor of music said that was good playing? Of course. But you're started now, and you actually produced a result that made a difference, and you made an impact there. That's the point with the paint by numbers approach. Does that make sense? So let's get into it. Let me just show you what this looks like. Now, what you're going to have access to in the training is I've got a quick and dirty spreadsheet I put together today where you'll see the causes that you can uncover. These are all causes that we talk about. Oh, you know what? Am I not sharing my screen? I need to share my screen again, don't I? Add to stream. Okay, there we go. All right. Okay, now I can share with you the spreadsheet. Okay, so this spreadsheet will show you different causes like conversations, bad, wrong, victim, and pettiness, reasonable or justified, selfish. These are all like basic causes for somebody not following through, right? And then varying issues that stem from that cause, right? Because some of them have sub-issues. And then we get into like, okay, these are the conversations in step 1 that you've uncovered. And then, step 2, like these are the kind of things you're going to say. Step 3, these are the kind of things that you're going to say. And so I'm going to share this with y'all so that if you find one of these in step 1, being how you feel, apathy, I don't care, great. Hey, this isn't about you. This is about your word and integrity. At some point, you need to get the impact you have on yourself, others, on results, and on the world, and on and on and on. Get my gist here. So it's all covered here. You just read this stuff and get somewhere with it. It's not perfect. You really need the flowcharts for that. That's why we need to get over to these again and use these to kind of navigate your way through those conversations. But with that combination, you're in great shape. Now, what I've labored to produce here is the beginning of, we'll just go to it, a kind of a more a cleaner guide than just that quick and dirty spreadsheet. And I've shared this on the screen here as well. And so what you'll see is we've put this spreadsheet into just a 3-column format like this. And in that 3-column format, you've got all the dialogues you'll need for that particular conversation. So what you'll see here is there's the cause and then the issue, and then you'll have a page for each issue. And if you've identified the issue, then you just find the conversation that is pertinent, and then bam, you've got a step 2 impact conversation and a step 3 commitment conversation to have. So I'm going to read this. I'm going to share. Keep it shared on my screen here. I'm just going to read this kind of introduction. We'll talk a little bit about it, and then I'll tell you exactly what you want to do with this. So as it says here, cause, impact, commitment, lineage. So think of lineage like there's this thread that stems from the beginning to the end. There's a lineage of these conversations, these distinctions that you're bringing to the table. Whenever you've successfully completed step one, approach and awareness, is where you discover the cause of what's stopping your client from following through. There are threads between the cause your client has uncovered and what you might cover during step two, impact, and step three, commitment. These threads, called the lineage you draw, can support continuity, clarity, accountability, leadership opportunities, and value throughout the rest of that accountability coaching process. So if you're just like improvising stuff and just saying whatever you feel like, even if you're following the spreadsheet or even if you're following the flow chart, you might miss this stuff. You might miss the best conversation that should be that should be prescribed, if you will. I'm not a doctor, but kind of prescribed and specifically for that client in that situation, for that stopping point for them, right? And so you can connect those dots finally now with this kind of support. So to follow the lineage between cause, impact, and commitment, these are just three different steps in the accountability coaching process. Simply find your client's uncovered cause and specific issue. So the uncovered cause is going to be right at the top of each of these pages. Look directly to the right of the cause column for valuable items to share in the impact step. So you'll see here it says, and I'll just scroll down a little bit. You can see it says, when you uncover this conversation, number 2, literally paint by numbers, right? 1, 2, 3. 2, share this during step 2. So during step 2, you're going to share these items, right? And then finally, look directly to the right of the impact column for valuable items to share in the commitment step. And so that's right here, number 3, and share this during step 3. So obviously you're going to cover more than this. You're going to have questions, different elements that you're going to bring to the table. They're generic to any client or might be specific to them based upon what they brought up that you also are uncovering in your flow charts. But this gives you the basics for that particular issue, that particular conversation that's getting in their way because you uncovered it. Does that make sense? I mean, this is the good stuff. I mean, this is really what you want. I'm trying to scroll here. Okay, so for instance, I'll just read this example here. So if the conversation your client had that stopped them was, I don't want to, very common. Once you get to the impact step, where you're actually working with them on what's the impact of that thing that stopped them, you're going to cover all sorts of things. But one of the things you could share is what's right on the page here. You can live as your word or you can live as your wants, and you will never be happy living as your wants. Why would that matter when somebody just said, I don't want to? Because you're literally addressing how somebody can live. Are they basing their actions on what they just want to do? Or are they basing their action on their word? Those are two very different ways to live, right? If you just do whatever you want, you're going to have a whole different life than actually being your word to what you truly have promised, right? So you can live as your word. It's like, hey, I don't want to, Mr. Coach. Well, you can live as your word or you can live as your wants, and you will never be happy living as your wants. Who said you need to be willing? Here's a whole different conversation. Who said you need to be willing? Coaching is about doing what you're unwilling to do, right? Hey, like that. It's like now it's not even an issue whether you want to or not. If you can't get yourself to do this now, how will you ever get your goal? And again, we have a fill in the blank there for the goal, whatever is at stake for that particular client. And then finally, in the commitment step, we have a more lengthy dialogue here. I won't read all of it, but again, our client just said, I don't want to. I just don't want to do that. Okay, well, in the commitment step, you've already covered the impact. They're ready to recommit. The fact that you don't want to is perfect. The fact you don't want to do this is perfect. If you want a breakthrough, a miracle, then you'll have to do something that you weren't already going to do. Things you weren't already going to do include something that you didn't want to do or something that you wouldn't normally do. So what are we saying here? We're saying, hey, like this is just like you, just not to do what you don't want to do. If you really want a breakthrough, you're going to have to do something different, right? And it's perfect that you don't want to do it then because, hey, if If you weren't already going to do this, then that could actually create a miracle for you. And that's kind of getting ahead of myself here, but again, it's written red and white here. If we put your words in red, what defines a miracle is that it was something unforeseen and unimaginable before it occurred. You doing this thing that you don't want to do is exactly that, unimaginable. It's probably almost certainly not going to happen. And we already know that. How do we know that, by the way? Way back in step 1, my client actually told me that, right? So they're going to be like, yeah, there's no way I'm going to do that. You just made that point by what we just uncovered in terms of how you're being about this commitment. In this conversation, you'll either throw a fit or you'll break through to the next level. This is an opportunity for you to step outside of your box and be committed to something bigger than even your whole life is right now. So if you were to simply do this, that would be a breakthrough. That would be a miracle for you. You see how that starts to shift the conversation when they need to recommit to this, when they actually need to commit to transforming what got in their way. This is a transformational conversation. They start seeing the opportunity in them to actually do what they don't want to do because it's an opportunity. It'll create a miracle in their life, potentially. I mean, that's the idea here, at least. It would be a blow for freedom for you. Because for once, you would not be being your own selfish wants and needs, and instead be your word. That's powerful. If you could do this, if you could say, or if you say you will be your word, then that is a breakthrough for you because you already did say you would be your word. Anything else is just some fabrication. So that's just one little tiny element that could be uncovered in step 1 and how it might follow through in the lineage of conversations, in the framework of conversations, the actual content of it, not just the context, like we cover in the flowcharts, like the different decisions and questions and kind of where you want to go next in general. This gives you, here's exactly what you can say. Does that make sense? That's the point here. That's what I wanted you to have. So you're going to get the cleaned up version very soon. This quick and dirty version, all of these different causes and different dialogues surrounding those causes, they're already available to you. And I'm going to share it with those of you that are in Accountability Immersion Training. So you got access to that. And that's really it. That's what I wanted to make sure you understood today. This is what I did when I first learned jazz improvisation. I wasn't very improvisatory. Okay. I was very like, okay, do this and do this, very herky-jerky, very mechanical. That's okay. What that led to was smoother connections and suddenly being able to do once or twice things like just naturally that would flow through me, and which ultimately led through more practice, more memorization, more connecting dots, more composition, etc. Just total freedom, but with accurate language so that it actually sounded good and it made sense. I mean, people could just do like avant-garde stuff in music and just blather all over their horns or their pianos or whatever, and just all sounds like the same. It's just like all mud, right? That's what a lot of coaching sounds like when somebody's just like freely just talking about whatever. It doesn't like get anywhere. It's not actually effective. But I was able to do that in music at the time effectively with accuracy in a way that really fit for the musicians I played with, for the audiences I played for, etc. Now I could do that as well after 20 years in a coaching conversation, in a demonstration as well. And, it took me, a couple years to do that and hundreds of hours of coaching, if not thousands. For the first couple of years, I was lucky enough just to have that much experience. But what I want for you, because you may not be coaching 80 people ever, for that matter. Most coaches don't coach more than like 10 or 20. I want you to have these dialogues and the flowcharts so that even each conversation that you have these in front of you. And if you're on a phone, nobody knows you've got them in front of you. And you can improvise, but you can also use this languaging and start, again, kind of connecting those Lego pieces. That's what this is about. I've lived that 2 different ways in 2 different languages, the language of music and the language of coaching. And I can tell you it works throughout lots of different frameworks, lots of different languages, even languages that are unfamiliar to you. The language of transformation, the language of coaching is unfamiliar to a brand new coach, very unfamiliar. They might know certain things around personal growth and personal development. I knew that stuff for years before I could coach anybody. I could like train somebody in stuff I knew about, but I couldn't coach to save my life, save anybody else's life for that matter. What it took was freeing myself up by understanding how all these things flow together in an integrated conversation. So how do you do this? 3 steps. Number 1, memorize these dialogues I'm going to give you, or the dialogues you already got as well. Just memorize them. Play those flowchart videos and trainings 5, 10, 15 times, again and again and again. And like, you should be bored with that stuff by the time you stop. Why should you be bored? Because people get bored when it's not novel for them. Like, newness is always exciting, but if it's not new anymore and you kind of know it, now you're bored. So you need to be bored with every part of this before you skip on to the next thing. You know, real mastery is like just knowing one move amazingly well. So that's mastery, like 10, 15 times, watching this stuff, listening to it again and again and again, before, during, and after, well, not during, but before and after coaching sessions. So you integrate it in with the dialogues that you have in coaching naturally. Then use the flowcharts as guides to bring you from one conversation to the next, so you know what you're doing and when you need to do it. And that'll help you connect those puzzle pieces. You'll connect those dots. And then finally, once you've done that and you've used maybe this lineage chart as well, that's another way to approach it, you can forget all of it. I don't mean forget it like you'll never need to use those words again. I mean, forget it like I forgot all the little licks that I had learned because they were just a part of the music for me after a while. And that's what's going to happen for you as a coach. After a while, these little languaging things that you've assembled together and that you're preparing for people, suddenly they're just part of the music. They're just part of the background. And then you can really, truly be with your client. I know we all want to be with our clients like from day one, but if you're going to learn technique, you're going to have to concentrate on the technique a little bit. And this is where you actually pay that price. This is where you're going to sweat it out and learn this stuff. You do this, I promise you, you'll know it like the back of your hand. Then you'll start assembling it into coaching sessions, and then you'll just be a master coach. That's all it takes. So that's the paint by numbers approach. Use this stuff, learn it, master it with your clients. I look forward to seeing how it works for you in our next training session. Take care until then.